41 of Two Kevins with Grace and Steele. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
We open this podcast with a guest. Kevin MacDonald is a retired psychology professor at California State University, an author of several works on Judaism and Jewish culture, including Understanding Jewish Influence, a study in ethnic activism. He is the editor of the Occidental Observer, a publication that promotes white identity and Western culture. This presidential election cycle, a lot of attention has been paid to Jewish influence in American politics, in foreign policy, and in the media in general, resulting in a lot of controversy. Recently, the Anti-Defamation League announced it would form a task force to investigate what it called anti-Semitic and racist harassment of journalists on social media. Professor MacDonald spoke with my co-host, Kevin Michael Grace, about this influence and about this recent attention last week.
So my first question is, about a year ago, it seemed to me that something extraordinary happened in America. There was a kind of political revolt, which happened almost entirely on the internet. This was coincidental with the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. A year after this, we have this extraordinary situation whereby people are parenthesizing their last names in protest against a movement which singles them out as Jews. In other words, we have a great deal of attention being paid to Jewish influence in the United States. Are you as shocked by this as I am?
Well, I am surprised, I guess. Actually, about a year ago, I was on the verge of, I wouldn't say I was ever going to give up, this cause, but I didn't see any openings, that the mainstream media was so close to us and so on. I didn't see any presidential candidates that I could possibly, take us out of this morass. And here we are, 1 year later, and as you say, the so-called alt-right is, all over the internet. It's getting more attention in the media, I'd have to say. Quite a few articles. Richard Spencer's National Policy Institute, for example, is getting a lot of attention. And Jewish influence, yes. And I think that Jewish influence is part of this now. It is part of the alt-right. Now, there's some people who don't emphasize as much as others, but it is there. And these Jewish organizations have certainly noticed it. The ADL now has a task force about the so-called echo meme, whatever you want to call it. I mean, what it is basically is that people are identifying people as Jews. So when, say, Jonah Goldberg or Jeffrey Goldberg or Max Boot or Jennifer Rubin, when they, make their pronouncements, they've always been used to be thought of as just sort of normal Americans, that their Jewish identity was not supposed to be relevant to anything. But now people are pointing that out, and I think it's a good thing in general.
Well, to move back a step, I'm speaking as someone who had his career ruined because he was identified as an anti-Semite, simply because I took the view that influence, well, it should be mentioned because there's all sort of influence. To give an example, my background is Catholic Irish. And in the United States, in Canada, in Britain, in the 90s and 70s and 80s, there were a great many of people with Irish surnames who were openly or surreptitiously supporting the activities of the Irish Republican Army, a terrorist group. Now, in the same, I saw nothing wrong with people. Obviously, if you have people supporting the IRA, and like Peter King, the member of the House of Representatives. Oh, well, I see you're talking about Ireland here, and you happen to be of Irish descent yourself. Do you think that this perhaps colors your opinion on it? Can you explain to me how is it that, we have Turkish influence in the United States, for instance. We have all these different kinds of influence, but for some reason, Jewish influence in politics, in culture, in money is off limits.
Yeah, and that's a direct marker, I think, of Jewish power. That Jews are very adept, and they if you say, if you call attention to Jewish influence in Hollywood, if you call attention to the Israel lobby, if you talk about the role of neoconservatives in promoting the Iraq War, you will be called an anti-Semite, and they will try to get you fired from your job. They will try to get you shunned and ostracized in any possible way they can. We still have the First Amendment in America, but that doesn't mean there aren't quite a few informal sanctions that can be imposed on people, and that's exactly what's happened. So it's just really a marker of Jewish power. I mean, with the Irish, they don't have as much power in terms of shifting American foreign policy. You didn't have the Irish sympathizers in America, promoting a war that the United States would engage in and cost trillions of dollars and cost thousands of lives and so on. That didn't happen.
No, that's true, but you did have various American presidents bringing IRA terrorists to the White House on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I agree that as long as you have people who identify with different ethnic groups, you're going to have ethnic influence. But the problem is that with Jewish influence, it's off limits. And it tends to be much more, it has much larger effects on society. Jews are just a much more powerful group than the Irish Republican Army or anything else. So, or other, Middle Eastern, if you look at Palestinians, Muslim groups in this country, they're nowhere near as powerful as Jewish groups are. And again, the big point is, and the reason why we have to focus on Jewish interest and influence is because they've had such a dramatic influence on different aspects of American life, including our foreign policy, especially since 9/11, but going way back actually, and during the Reagan administration and so on. So it's very important, and Jews are very important as far as producing culture. So if you want to ask, what the origins of the sort of leftist movements that have come to dominate, you really can't even talk about it without talking about Jewish intellectuals and their coteries, their groups, they're citing each other, and the cohesiveness of those groups. And so I think that, and the problem is that it's off limits. I mean, you'll see people will have a column or write a book about Irish influence or something like that. But it's not going to get that person fired from his job. It's going to be in a mainstream paper. There may be some, complaints about it and so on, but it's not going to be a big deal.
Well, I wanted to ask you this question in that regard, that you will often see self-identified Jews writing on subjects of, let's say, morality or ethics, and they will often introduce this as speaking as a Jew. And they will often mention the concept of tikkun olam in this regard, repairing the world. Now, it just seems to me odd that, if Judaism is irrelevant, then how do they get away with mentioning it in those examples?
Well, I think it's those examples that are chosen by those speakers. They're very selectively. They are not likely to apply those principles to Israel, say. I mean, they'll talk about tikkun olam, why we have to take in refugees, why we have to have high levels of immigration, why diversity is good, and all that. And they'll phrase them as this Jewish imperative. But when it comes to Israel, a lot of these same people are supporting this rather rabid, extreme ethno-state, and they bar immigration. They have admitted zero refugees in this recent refugee crisis in the Middle East, and so it's very selective. So when they say this is some kind of Jewish ethics, and I've written about this with respect to immigration. If you look at Jewish websites like the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, for example, they will always justify their promotion of immigration and refugees in terms of Jewish ethics. And they will never apply those principles to Israel. So it's just, to me, I just see this as a sort of ethnic warfare. I don't see it as principled morality. And, it's...
Well, I mean, I don't have any objection whatsoever to the state of Israel. I've always identified as a Zionist. But my position is that this is not really a big deal. And it shouldn't be a big deal. And the idea that in the United States, and now in my own country of Canada, and this happened under the Harper government, that apparently Israel is the most important question not just in the world, but in Canada as well, I find this absolutely extraordinary. It's one thing for people to cheer for the home team, but the idea that, all of us have to cheer for someone else's home team.
Exactly. That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, again, Israel is different because, for one thing, the American government is giving $3 billion a year in foreign aid. It's going to go up to $5 billion this year. We have supported them in their foreign policies. We have been susceptible. The war in Iraq never would have happened without these neoconservatives and their agenda, which was really promoted by Israeli think tanks and so on. We have paid an enormous cost for having a sort of this relationship with Israel. And, again, I would agree. I mean, I have no problem with Israel as a state, but the problem is it's been such a drain on America, and that we are expected to, do all these things for Israel. And, the other thing is the hypocrisy and double standards where, like we're saying, that Jewish organizations just unanimously in this country are for very liberal immigration policies and refugee policies, and yet the same organizations will support Israel, and they're expelling the African migrants. They're not taking in any immigrants unless they can trace their Jewish ancestry.
So, sure. In that regard, Benjamin Netanyahu was something of a hero to a lot of people on what you might call the far right in America.
Yeah, I mean, if only it was okay for to have the idea that America or Canada should be the possession of its traditional people, that the people that dominated, that founded the countries and dominated them, at least until very recently. But the idea that America it should be the possession, say, of European-derived people is anathema. But the idea that Israel is a Jewish state is sacred, and everybody has to salute that. And the same people that go to the mat on Israel as a Jewish state will absolutely deny that America has any European sort of essence to it, or Canada does. And so what I see is ethnic warfare here. I see that massive double standards. I don't see any principled morality. I just see, ethnic warfare as usual.
There's a writer I'm sure you've heard of called Ron Rosenbaum. He wrote a very interesting book on Hitler.
Yeah,
he wrote a very interesting book on Hitler a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure I do that. No.
He had a column in the New York Press.
Yeah.
And he boasted about. He said one of the achievements of the Jews in America was that they had destroyed the idea of America as a Christian nation.
That's right.
Now, I rather appreciate his honesty. But on the other hand, when I read this, my jaw dropped open, and I thought, how is he able to get away with this?
Well, that's a major theme of my book, The Culture of Critique. The idea of America as a proposition nation. That during the 1920s, you had very robust sort of people like Madison, Grant, Lothrop Stoddard. They were very much influenced by Darwin. They had a strong sort of racial identity. They thought of America as a European civilization, particularly a Northern European civilization, and that was obliterated. And Franz Boas and all these Jewish intellectual movements did destroy it, and absolutely right. But again, the idea that Israel is a Jewish state is sacrosanct. You go to the from one end of the Jewish community to the other, and that is pretty much dogma. And but the idea that America, should and ought to be have some kind of European derivation and continue to have European institutions, European identity, keep the population, demographics European, that is just anathema. And that is, I think, one of the main, results of these Jewish intellectual movements. That's why I had a whole chapter on immigration policy. This is the big one. In other words, you can have all these leftist movements you want, but it's not going to really change facts on the ground the way that immigration does.
No, you're absolutely right. The people. This is the most important thing. And if the nature of the people is changed irrevocably, then I don't know whether recrudescence is possible.
Well, it's not going to be. If it is possible, it will take a huge upheaval. It'll be a cataclysmic upheaval. That is
Now, I wanted to ask you about a problem which has arisen. You might call it the intersectionality problem for Israel. The whole world is multicultural, and everyone loves multiculturalism. Everyone demands multiculturalism. When I say everyone, I mean our elites. But Israel is not a multicultural country. It is a Jewish state. So you see this BDS movement rising up, and you see these ferocious disputes, mostly on college campuses now, between champions of Israel and champions of Palestine. And Israel, for some reason, continues to play the underdog card, despite the fact that it has been the overdog in that part of the world, well, for over half a century. And I wondered what you thought about this idea of Israel being at threat from intersectionality, that, it's not a multicultural state, so it is being fitted for the same clothing as South Africa.
Right. And it's interesting to compare South Africa to Israel. I mean, during the 1980s, South Africa was just absolutely excoriated, pilloried. Actually, there was an alliance between South Africa and Israel for quite a while until it was too costly for Israel. Israel didn't have any real principles about that, and they're an apartheid state themselves. But South Africa did not have this media establishment in all these Western countries that would stand up for it. They didn't have massive lobbying groups and political contributions the way these Jewish groups do. So, Sheldon Adelson, $100 million. His whole issue is Israel. Haim Sabin and the Democrat Party, same thing. Millions and millions of dollars to these candidates to support Israel. Well, that didn't happen with South Africa. They were relatively powerless. And there was just, the left just ate them up. But now we're seeing a very different ballgame here. Israel is fighting back. And now I just see that the governor of New York has put out this thing where the state of New York is going to boycott or try to have all kinds of sanctions on companies that are cooperating with BDS or any organization that cooperates.
We have a similar move in Canada.
Yeah,
actually.
And so this is power. That they are going to fight this thing. They are going to have their cake and eat it too. They're not going to give in on this, and they're not going to give up any territory over there. So I don't see I think from their point of view, I think there are two things really. One is they do feel that they're very powerful, and they are. They're flexing their muscles now. I wouldn't say that Israel is under any significant threat. But secondly, within Israel, the fanatics are in charge, and they're not going to give up an inch. So any government that said, "Well, let's make peace with the Palestinians, let's give up some land, make a peace deal, 2 states, and all that." That is a political non-starter in Israel, and it just can't happen. So these Jewish communities in the diaspora have to make their peace with that. Either they're
you see how Israeli politics have changed, because 20 years ago, the Labor Party was extremely powerful,
right,
and they were talking about Israel joining the Arab League.
Yeah,
which is if you said that now, you'd say you made this up. That never happened. But until fairly recently, you see that the attitude on the right the question on the right was, how much do you love Israel? And it seemed to me the question on the left for some time has been, how much do you hate Israel? And it just strikes me as being quite dangerous.
It's starting to be a problem for Israel, on the left, especially in England, by the way, with the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, and they are. That party really has to have these Muslim votes, and they're not at all pro-Israel. And now there are quite a few big-time Muslims in the Labour Party, and they are just not at all in favor, supporting Israel. I would say that it's a sort of similar thing, but much less powerful in the Democrat Party in this country. But it is a serious issue in the UK, and they're having big fights there. And
yes, I've seen that. But the question is, given that the leftists, the multiculturalists, the social justice warriors insist that all of the countries of the world be dipped into the acid bath of radical multiculturalism, how is it that Israel can avoid this?
Well,
What is
I
the
think,
argument? What is the argument that they can use? Oh well, yeah, sure. That happens to all the other countries, and that's fine with us. But no, we are a special case.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a great example of Jewish power in the media, and when they're confronted with arguments like that, they'll say, "Well, Israel is the only democratic state in the Middle East." They will actually portray Israel as a multicultural society because you had different groups of Jews there, and they'll also advertise the fact that there are Arabs within Israel proper that are citizens and so on. They won't talk about their second class status that they have. But yeah, there's just a huge propaganda, and again, you're talking about a very powerful group, and powerful in the media, powerful there in the sense that they're able to set up these organizations, lobbying organizations. They're powerful in the sense that they can destroy careers of people. You say it destroyed your career. They certainly tried to destroy my career, and so it's one thing after another. They are a very powerful group, and so they can get away with these things. I mean, to you and me, we look at these at the contrast, that what Israel really is, and it's just so obvious. But if you use the word apartheid, like I think Jimmy Carter used the word apartheid describing Israel, well, he just had a barrage of hostility directed towards him, and all these Jewish apologists. It's not apartheid. It's not apartheid.
Well, no, I just interrupt to say that, that these little enclaves that they've talked about on the West Bank.
Yeah.
Well, these are obviously directly analogous to Bantustans.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no way around it. Now, I'll just repeat again that I'm not an enemy of Israel, and frankly, I don't care what they do. I really don't. I'm not one of these people who get sentimental talking about the Palestinians. My view is, why is this our business?
Right. That's the same with me. I think the idea of an ethno-state is just fine. The problem is that the entire organized Jewish community and all the Jewish power and money are directed against any idea that America or Canada, really has any kind of European essence or identity. And
well, let's move away from America and Canada, and let's talk about, say, England, France, Germany, just to give three examples. These are not colonial states.
No.
The population of these states has been roughly the same for, 900 years or so. We're talking about aboriginals here, and yet the same rules apply to the aboriginals of Europe as they do to the descendants of the colonialists of North America.
That's right, but if you go over to the UK and these other places, I'm actually not too familiar with exactly how they frame this elsewhere. But in the UK, they say they make the argument that England has always been a nation of immigrants, and that they talk about the Huguenots, or the
what are we talking? We're talking about. Since the Norman Conquest, we're talking about, 20,000 people or something in 900 years?
Right.
It's preposterous.
And you developed a very strong sense of being English, being British, and so on in that time. And these people are all closely related. They meshed with each other. They assimilated. Now you have a situation where you're bringing these Middle Easterners in. They have no attention to assimilate. They are producing parallel societies. They are very dependent on welfare, very different culture, very aggressive culture. And God forbid, what's going to happen. But you see this idea that these countries, you don't see the idea that they are indigenous peoples. You just never see that. They will defend to the death the indigenous peoples of some far off place, but they will not defend, even talk about the indigenous English in the same way as having any rights at all. And again, we see the same thing over there. We see here this top-down revolution. It's a revolution from above, where these elites in the media, the academic world, the business, and so on, politics have imposed this on the people. There's never been a referendum on it. And so the people are really disenfranchised, and there's nothing to choose between Labour and Conservative Party in England. Nothing, and God knows even UKIP is pretty soft, and they probably have to be soft because of the atmosphere over there.
Well, no, the UKIP has this strange idea that if we bring in these people from the Commonwealth, and the fact that these people are so different from, the English, well, no, it's from the Commonwealth, so that makes it okay. I don't really see any difference between bringing in people from Poland, say, and bringing in people from the Commonwealth. The idea is that they're not British.
That's right. And I would say that in general, I mean, I think that Poland should stay Poland and Britain should stay Britain. But Poles are going to integrate in the long run way better than someone from Africa or Afghanistan or Syria or those places into British society. And 100 years from now, you probably wouldn't even notice the Poles came if there weren't too many of them.
There was a bunch that came over during the time of the Second World Polish Airmen.
Yeah, that kind of.
And members of the Home Army who came over during the Second World War and shortly thereafter. But again, we're talking about a few thousand.
That's right. But now the ideology on the left is that they really want to displace this population. They want to sort of grind these native British down
people in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
It is absolutely clear that the idea was to, and this is a quote, to rub their faces in diversity.
Exactly.
And to make it so that no right-wing government could ever be elected in Britain again.
That's right.
This is the sort of thing that people should be hanged for. But, that's interesting. That's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And that government, the Tony Blair government, was the worst. But the Conservative government, I really don't think they're doing very much. And
the difference, I don't need to explain this to you. The difference is that the Labour does it out of the goodness of its heart originally and now malevolence. And the Conservatives do it because they think it means bigger profits for the globalists.
Yeah, I mean, they're very globalist. You see that in America, too. You have Republican parties, they want free trade, they're globalists, they want open borders, cheap labor, and that sort of thing. And then the Democratic Party, they are, ethnic activists, basically, and also, these sort of, very sort of do-gooder types that just think it's a moral imperative.
Now, I wanted to take us back to the alt-right, and we can start, strangely enough, in Britain, that this chain called Metro, which is a Swedish chain of giveaway newspapers around the world. Mm-hmm. Well, they ran a piece a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, on echoing. And the woman who wrote this is called Ashitna Nagesh, an Indian woman. Dot, not feather, as they say. And she said non-Jewish people have also been using the echo around their own names to confuse anti-Semites and in solidarity with victims of harassment. And it seems to be working, ... in the original. And then she has embedded a tweet from Yair Rosenberg. And this made me laugh all day long yesterday because I thought, this is intersectionality right there, that you have a woman writing about a Jewish subject that she comes across a name which, I don't know, what the Scottish equivalent would be something like Angus MacDuff, or the Welsh equivalent would be something like Gwyneth Jones, and she doesn't recognize it to be a Jewish name. But I wanted to ask you about this echoing with regard to the alt-right. Now, this business of the parenthesis, the triple parenthesis, occurs, as far as I can see, as a provocation. And yet now you have all of these people, like Yair Rosenberg, adopting it as a badge of pride. What do you make of that response?
Well, I don't know exactly. I think they are sort of owning it. I don't think it's going to stop the echo thing. The people who are doing this are going to continue doing it, but yeah, they're sort of owning it. I think they're sort of, we're Jewish, I guess, but at the same time, I think they're a little troubled about the idea that when they have their name out there, they're saying they're Jewish. I mean, I think that's really. I mean, I wrote like a long time ago. I just put in an article that I put out yesterday. That wouldn't it be nice if Jews had to sort of identify themselves when they wrote something that was relevant to Jewish interests, like these neocons promoting the Iraq War. Wouldn't it be nice if they had to preface their statement by saying, "Well, look, I'm Jewish, and yes, Israel has an interest here," and so on. But they don't do that. They've never done that, and I think that the truth is, the reality is that they don't really like having their identity exposed as Jewish. I think that
it depends on the circumstances. This woman, Julia Joffe, I have read, at least partially, dozens of her pieces, and they're all the same. I am a Jewish woman from Russia, and Russia was anti-Semitic. You're giving us the goods right there in the beginning, and then later, how dare you call me Jewish?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an amazing thing. She has been one of the people.
When people do this routine, oh well, I'm Jewish, and I think, yeah, okay. Do you have $7? Because you can get one of those grande lattes with those two things together.
Yeah.
So what? So what that you're Jewish? I mean, this is special pleading, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I would think it'd be a breath of fresh air if Jews in the media identify themselves as Jews and maybe talked about how this intersects with Jewish interests. I think in general we've seen the opposite, and this is why this is sort of a shift here. If you listen to someone like Abe Foxman, there's always been this idea that Jews run Hollywood or something like that. Well, his response was, well, of course there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood, but they're just Jews. They don't have any Jewish interests. There's nothing Jewish about them, and so it doesn't affect anything. So don't worry about it, kind of thing. And of course, then I, respond, well, you go through there and you show it affects content of movies, that you see a lot of anti-Christian movies, but you don't see any anti-Jewish movies, for example. And so, that's the kind of thing they don't want to have the idea that what Hollywood is producing has anything to do with Jewish identity. So this is different now, and I think it is a breath of fresh air, and I don't think that Jews, even the ones that are going along with it and they're putting parentheses around their own name or whatever they're doing, I don't think they're very happy with this. This is something that they want to eradicate, and the ADL wants this meme eradicated. They want Twitter to censor it. So I think that's really what they're at, what they want.
Now, you mentioned Richard Spencer. Everyone seems to know Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
I interviewed Paul Gottfried recently, and he knows Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
Do you know any of these so-called shit posters on the internet?
I don't know them personally, I guess. A lot of them are anonymous. I don't know who they are.
Well, no, I brought that up because I wondered whether you had any idea, any reason to believe that these people had been influenced by your work.
Oh, I don't know. It's possible that they are. I do get people who say, "Well, I've read your book, thanks," and all that, and it's changed the way I see things. I do get some of that, but these there are people like, say, Ricky Vaughn has like 30,000 followers on Twitter, and I don't think that's his real name. It's somebody but he's putting out all this alt-right kind of stuff, and he's got a lot of followers. These are the shit posters, I guess.
That's the kind that I meant.
Yeah. And I don't know, the people I know, and then we're trying to cultivate people who can come out and be public. Ramsey Paul, I guess his real name is Paul Ramsey. He's out, and Richard, of course, Richard Spencer's out. I'm out. And Jared Taylor, people like that. I mean, I think that's what we had to do. Sam Dixon, everybody knows.
Well, you have the difference in respectability here.
Yeah.
Because now this could be a generational thing. I'm obviously twice as old, or maybe more than twice as old, than most of these so-called shit posters.
Yeah.
And the fun, if you will, that they have with the Second World War, with the various motifs of Germany and of the Nazi Party and with the Holocaust, yeah. I must say is rather horrifying to me. And I wondered what you thought of it.
Well, I agree. I just wrote an article yesterday, and I said a lot of these are really crude. And I think the people doing them are all anonymous. They do not want to be exposed. And I think these posts are from young men. It's a young man thing. They're being rebellious. They're probably not real educated, but they have their ideas and they're putting them out there. But again, I think that the fact that they are anonymous detracts a lot from the whole thing. I think people.
They don't have any choice. They don't
have a choice.
It was put to me, when I started writing. Oh, when I went on Twitter, which wasn't all that long ago, it was put to me that I should become anonymous because if the rather mild things that you have to say, well, you are going to be in so much trouble that you won't believe it. And I kind of thought, I really have nothing to lose at this point, so I'm not going to go anonymous. But I wanted to ask you this. I was born 10 years after the Second World War ended. This idea of the Holocaust was not a word that people used. The figure of 6 million Jews being killed in the Second World War by the Nazis was a figure which was out there that most people had heard of. And this idea that Holocaust all the time was not something I grew up with. And it occurred to me, something to perhaps explain, if not excuse, this refashioning of Nazi memes, is that these younger people are simply sick to death of the idea that something that happened between 1941 and 1945 is apparently the only thing that ever happened in history. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I think that I'm older than you are. I did not grow up with it at all. And there's a book by Michael Novak, I guess, and he talks about the history of the Holocaust culture, the culture of the Holocaust. And, it didn't exist right after World War. It didn't really exist till the 1970s. And then you had a famous TV series about the Holocaust, which I saw some of. And then it snowballed. And there's just a huge publishing industry and dozens of movies. And again, once Jews decide to promote something, they are, as Michael Novak said, they are the people of the word. And so the movies get made, op-eds get written, books get written. People who deny the Holocaust or Holocaust revisionists, they get persecuted. And they are, and a lot of countries have laws. So again, it's an index of Jewish power, really. And I do think these young people, being rebellious and they're sick of it and all this political correctness, they probably lump it together with all the other stuff, transgender bathrooms and the whole madness that we're seeing now, and they just want to, be rebellious, and I can't.
Well, there's an English author called Pierce Paul Reed, one of my favorite writers. He writes novels and nonfiction works, and he wrote a book called 1990 called On the Third Day, and it has to do with the theme of the tomb of Jesus Christ and the idea that supposedly this tomb has been found. Now, the question of the Holocaust came up in the book, and the argument is made. Now, of course, you can't describe the thoughts of a character to the author, but in this case, I don't think that they're a million miles removed from Reed's own thought. And the idea is that we hear more and more about the Holocaust the further we get away from it, because the Jews are afraid that when people stop remembering the Holocaust, there will be nothing to unify the Jewish people.
Yeah, I think that it makes some sense. I think I made a point in one of my books that Jews actually like a certain amount of anti-Semitism too. That's sort of unifies them. But the ideology of the Holocaust certainly unifies Jewish people. It gives them. Some people have said that this is sort of what Judaism is now. It's sort of the religion of the Holocaust. That is the fundamental source of Jewish identity now. That in Israel.
I joked. I joked years ago. This is the first time I'm ever going to mention the joke because I thought, oh dear, this would get me into so much trouble. But what the hell? That there's two kinds of Judaism. There's the pre-1945 version of Judaism, which is we are special because God loves us so. And then there's the post-1945 version of Judaism, which is we are special because God hates us so.
Interesting.
No, I this idea that, you just hear this more and more, that everyone hates us, that everyone has always hated us. I thought, why are you saying this? Why don't you talk about your accomplishments? Why don't you talk about your intelligence, your wisdom, your skill, your cleverness, your charm, whatever? In so many ways, it strikes me as being counterproductive. I mean, as I mentioned before, that I come from an Irish background, and I'm sick of it myself. Oh, yes, the Irish have suffered so much for so many hundreds of years. And I thought, is that how you want to define yourself? By how miserable you are?
The thing is, I agree that it's not a very good way to define yourself in some sense. But in the other sense, this has been a very effective weapon for them. I mean, I think that when they start talking about immigration, if you start opposing immigration, well, it won't be long before they start, raising the issue of the Holocaust. So this is really the same, and the culture of the Holocaust really is the reason why you can't oppose immigration, multiculturalism. The German government in World War II had a strong sense of sort of racial identity and so on. That's anathema. You can't, have a sense of racial identity anymore.
If Jewish leaders can read polls, and I'm assuming they can, they will know that, say, the native populations of Canada, the United States, let's say England, France, Germany, that there are very low levels of anti-Semitism in these countries and exceedingly high levels of anti-Semitism in the people who they are bringing into the country as migrants.
Exactly. And
this is a suicidal strategy. I mean, we see perhaps there's talk in France of maybe the Jewish community disappearing altogether.
Yeah.
Of it simply them all leaving and going to Israel.
I think there are a couple of things to think about there. That there is some emigration from France. You've got to talk about a population of 1 million or so Jews in France, and I think 8,000 left last year. So it's not a huge exodus, but even if it was, there are different levels of Jews, and I think say Orthodox Jews with their distinctive clothing and so on are being attacked in the streets and so on. That's really bad, but you're not talking the Jews that are really involved in the media and the business world and the various Jewish elites are not really bothered by this in a personal level, and I don't think that's going to affect Jewish power in Europe. And I don't think they're going to emigrate. I mean, they can get along, walled estates and so on. They don't suffer the same way.
Well, I guess they'll have to have their food and all the rest of it delivered because, of course, these terrorists were going out of their way to attack Jewish places for being Jewish.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I never thought that I would see in my lifetime a speech like Donald Trump's America First speech. What did you think of that?
That's amazing. And last night he used that phrase again. And as soon as he used it, the ADL came down on him because that was the slogan of the isolationist group prior to World War II. And the Jews, of course, wanted World War II, and so they when they think of America First, they think of Charles Lindbergh and all that. They also think of Nazi Germany. But Donald Trump is not backing off on that, and that is the fundamental thing: America First. Whether it's immigration policy or trade policy, which are his two big issues. The idea that you should fashion immigration policy for the needs of America as opposed to some abstract ethical ideal is just absolutely horrifying to these elites, where they would have to justify it by looking at the effects on wages, look at unemployment, but it doesn't. Immigration is on autopilot. We've taken at least 1 million legal immigrants every year. And God knows.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, in Canada, we take anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 in a population base, which is like about 1/9
right
of the United States. But, I just tell you that a few years ago, I came to a shocking realization, which, I've been noted by my opposition to all forms of leftism. But I realized I'd rather live in a socialist country than a multicultural country. Because at least I'd have something in common with the people who surrounded me.
Yeah, I think socialism actually works pretty well in a homogeneous white country. You had a lot of socialist programs in Scandinavia and elsewhere, and I think that there's nothing really wrong with that. But now you're bringing in people who really, low IQ, they're relatively uneducated, and so on. They're taking advantage of the welfare systems, and I think that's a really bad recipe.
Oh, sure it is. But, you hear these people, I'm sure you're familiar with them, these leftists in North America, and for years they've appealed to Scandinavia and Germany and said, well, they do those things there.
Right.
And I thought, they never stopped for a moment to consider the possibility that the people there and the societies there are fundamentally different than ours. Anglo-Saxon societies, there's this tradition of anarchy or anarchism in the societies, of kicking against the pricks that doesn't exist there. In Germany, if you have a sign that says don't walk on the grass, it's not just that the Germans won't walk on the grass, they would never even consider walking on the grass. And now, they're being flooded by all these people who don't give a toss about any such regulations because, well, they're stupid. We take what we want to take.
Exactly. And I think that all those socialist programs were enacted when those were homogeneous white countries. And they would not be enacted, I don't think, as easily. And I think that's the problem with America, basically. Americans, I think you're right that there's a stronger sense of individualism here. And that was part of it. But also the fact that you had a substantial black population. And I think a lot of people didn't want to, stand in line for public health care with black people. And that's probably still the case now.
No, even among white people, I've noticed this. You don't have mass public drinking in Anglo-Saxon countries. In non-Anglo-Saxon countries, and they have Oktoberfest, where all these people, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people get drunk in the same place and nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
Too many people they cut off sales of beer at football games at halftime because they're terrified of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So with regard to Donald Trump, where do you stand on the question of his sincerity?
Well, I think he is sincere. I don't think he's had anything to gain by going through this ordeal, becoming president. He's already wealthy. Why not just live and be happy? Being a billionaire and a beautiful family and everything. But I think he really did feel that that he wanted to change some basic things in the country, and it wasn't going to happen without him. And I think, we see now that there are 17 Republican candidates. If something happened to him, he could not be replaced by any of those other guys. He's irreplaceable, and I think he's absolutely sincere. I think he's making some concessions as any politician has to do, I think, with respect to Israel. Is a good example. But the people who are most attached to Israel, as neoconservatives, do not trust him, and I think for good reason. That his foreign policy is much less interventionist than George Bush was, and much less intervention than these neocons would like. And so there are a lot of things they don't like about him.
Yeah, but isn't this good for the Jews? I mean, in the sense that, I predicted at the time of the invasion of Iraq that this was not going to be good for the Jews, and it was not going to be good for the perception of Israel in the United States and in the Western world generally. And I think my prediction has been borne out by the reality. This idea that, okay, fine. You want to advocate for Israel. Oh, we give money to Israel. That's one thing. What the hell has that got to do with us getting involved in these hellholes all over the world to no end?
Yeah, I think that that is certainly right. But I think that kind of opinion is still restricted to a pretty small people who really read newspapers and the internet and so on. The average person still doesn't get it. There's so many. I thought that was one of the things about Trump's victory that was most amazing, because the Republican Party has a lot of evangelicals who are just gung-ho pro-Israel and just a general. Then you have these neoconservatives who are at high levels in the party and running foreign policy and so on. It's an amazing thing that he got through all that.
Yeah, but the neoconservatives, I've been saying this for years, the neoconservatives have never had a political base.
No, they haven't.
And yet everyone kowtows to them, despite the fact that they destroyed Reagan's second term, that they destroyed George W. Bush. I used to think, do they have pictures of senior Republicans in hot tubs with naked Boy Scouts? Because I can't think of any other reason for their influence. Everything these people have ever touched has turned to ashes. You look at Iran-Contra, you would have to be brain damaged to come up with a scheme like that.
Yeah. It is. It's amazing. And you think about the absolute disaster of the Iraq War, what's happened in Libya, Syria. I mean, it's one thing after another. But if you read Robert Kagan or Bill Kristol's Weekly Standard, I mean, they are just pushing for more. And I think this is one of the big revolutions. If Trump gets in, these neoconservatives are out of influence. And that is the reality. And that means that they will fight to the end. The only alternative they have really at this point is to go to Hillary or to throw in a third party. And of course, Bill Kristol's been talking about a third party, but he hasn't found anybody, thank God. But they are out of business.
No, he was talking up Lindsey Graham yesterday.
Oh,
did you see that?
Well, I don't care if Lindsey Graham runs. Okay, he'll get.
No. But I don't. I think that Ricky Vaughn has come to the conclusion that Bill Kristol is just trolling everyone now.
It's ridiculous. This guy David French. I'd never even heard of this guy until he was mentioned. I mean, the guy that could have really done damage is Romney. He could have, if he'd run, the big name he ran before and so on, that would have been a problem. But I don't think these other guys are serious problems. I don't know what Kristol is doing. And I don't know why he's floating these names before he gets a person to agree to do this. It just makes him look like an idiot.
Pointed out, I don't think this person was on the right. Someone asked Kristol, hey, do you have any other friends that you would like to humiliate by putting them through this?
Yeah, I mean, just outrageous. Actually, I put out a tweet saying that I was available, but he never got back.
Well, with regard to neoconservative, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on one of the podcasts. I was for many years a neoconservative myself. I got in through this.
We all have our lapses, okay?
Well, yes. I got in through this through National Review.
Right.
And I didn't really understand the extent to which National Review was being subverted. And I read the American Spectator, which actually back in the 1970s was quite an interesting magazine. And I read commentary in the Public Interest and all of these. And I bought this whole nonsense about the Soviet Union looking for a first strike capability. You remember that bestseller called The Third World War by General Sir John Hackett?
I don't remember that.
Well, and then, I don't know, have you ever seen Adam Curtis's documentary, The Power of Nightmares?
No.
Well, he talks about Richard Pipes and his special team.
Uh-huh.
Richard Pipes was convinced that the Soviets were going for a first strike capability. Mm-hmm. And Reagan becomes president, and the neocons have this entree for some reason, which is beyond me. So he is given carte blanche. Basically, okay, you have the full run of the, American intelligence community. Find out what you can find out. So Richard Pipes finds out that there is no evidence that the Soviets are seeking a first strike capability. And guess what conclusion he came to based on that?
I can't imagine.
He came to the conclusion that it was obvious that the Soviets were seeking a first strike capability. Because, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence or whatever it is, right?
Well, in the Bush administration, they changed their tactics. When they didn't have any evidence, they didn't say that was evidence, but what they did say, what they did do was falsify the evidence.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, this is called the precautionary principle. And you see the same thing with global warming. Oh, there's no evidence that this is happening. Oh, my God. Then that means that we have to be terrified because we can't take the chance.
Right.
That no evidence makes it even more dangerous. But the reason I brought up this anecdote about me and the neoconservatives is that I reached a point where I thought, I don't think that I'm a fool. I don't think I'm a stupid person. These people have been lying to me for years, and they keep getting away with it.
That's the thing.
This has to stop.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There are a lot of intelligent, non-Jewish white people, and they read things like the National Review, Weekly Standard, commentary, and so on, and they get these ideas. I was watching the Megyn Kelly show last night, and she had this live thing in San Diego, and they were just having voters talk about their opinions. And they had this young guy, and he was obviously educated, he was obviously intelligent, and he was right out of National Review. He was like programmed, that we have to be in favor of freedom and in principle, conservative principles are the first thing. And Donald Trump does not have any strong conservative principles, and he's a racist besides. It's like, but he was obviously, so many young, middle people of all ages, intelligent people have gotten taken in by that.
Well, but the right has gotten taken in by this idea, or they have evilly adopted this idea that what you want to do is go around witch hunting. Yeah. Oh, racist, homophobe, misogynist. And I think these people are lost. Frankly, I don't know that there's any recovery from that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my final question. It's my own view that the so-called conservative movement committed suicide on the night of the Indiana primary, or more to the point that it set itself on fire, then threw itself over a cliff with all this never Trump carrying on. Now, I mean, if what I'm saying is true, National Review, the Weekly Standard, Red State, etc., these operations, the Examiner papers, they're all doomed. Do you see the growth of a alternative, based or woke, as they say in the alt-right, to replace this media, to replace these media organizations?
I wonder sometimes, because the alt-right is the only identifiable group I've written about. They were the only identifiable group that has supported Trump, and the others have done it, but they don't have an ideology. They're sort of getting in line. This, a lot of people have said this, that the Republican Party has been hijacked by these voters. This was not something that any identifiable group of elites in the Republican Party wanted. And so it's a whole new ballgame, and this is populism. It's a breath of fresh air that these Republicans are just voting on their, from what Trump is saying, his attitudes, his style and everything. This is a revolution. And these Never Trump people, they keep resurrecting it. Now, he said these things about the Mexican judge, with the Mexican ancestry judge, and now they're trying to resurrect that. They're trying to get Republicans to say they won't support him at the convention. So it's not going to die. But there was an article by Patrick Claiborne of Be There yesterday. He's claiming that there's already a sort of movement in the Republican Party to sabotage Trump and just hope for 2020. That these people, the people who run the party, after all, for them, it's a living, it's a job, it's a way of life. And that would all come down.
But Trump has shown that he doesn't need these people. And with regard to, say, something like the Weekly Standard, now, back in the day, the first generation of neoconservatives, these were smart people, and they were good writers. Yeah. If you get to the second and third generation, their magazines are terrible. They're poorly written. There's no substance there. Their arts coverage is a joke. The only reason why they exist is because, they represent a movement which is influential. Well, if their movement is no longer influential and they got nothing else going for them, then these media institutions will die.
Well, that's the thing. I think for them, this is Armageddon. They see this is the end of the road. You used to have a National Review. You had people like Peter Brimelow at National Review. They got purged. And if you talk to Peter Brimelow, he will tell you it was the neoconservatives who came in and did that. Sam Francis was very aware of that in the Reagan administration. People who, traditional conservatives just bounced out and labeled racist and this and that and the other thing. But this has been a gradual thing. And now they're in charge, but it's all chiefs and no Indians, as they say. They don't have a voting base that's significant. You got some college-educated people who, plug into the ideas of liberty or freedom or conservative principles and so on. But that's about it. It's not a broad voter base. And how these people can even contemplate voting for Hillary Clinton is way beyond me, because whatever she is, it ain't principled conservatism.
Well, okay, one final question. This is just quick, and I'm not going to hold you to this. It's just for fun. It's a prediction. I'm going to make my own prediction that Trump is going to win 58% of the popular vote and 420 electoral votes.
Woo.
What do you say?
Boy, that's my dream scenario. I wouldn't want to go higher than that. I'd go a little bit lower, but I do think he's going to win. I think that Hillary Clinton is a horrible candidate, and Donald Trump is willing to bring up all this stuff. Yesterday, he brought up the Clinton Foundation, all the scandals involved, and he's going to give a detailed presentation on that next week. He can really get her on those kinds of issues.
Sure. I'll just wrap it up by saying, that Michael Dukakis and Walter Mondale are considered the weakest Democratic candidates. In their defense, they didn't have the virtue that, a quarter of the country hated their guts.
Yeah. Hillary is not likable in any way. She's not likable as a speaker. Her involvement with the scandals, the email scandals, the Clinton Foundation scandals, the behavior that she's done with these women, with her husband, Bill Clinton, the fact that the Clinton Foundation takes all this money from these repressive Arab governments that do all these horrible things to women. I mean, there's just a huge amount of things that I don't care if you're Democrat or not, you just can't vote for her with any kind of enthusiasm.
You know the show Seinfeld?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote last week about Hillary's Uncle Leo defense.
Yes.
I'm an old woman. I'm confused. What's my name? Will you take me home?
Yeah, that's about it. She's her email excuses are getting thinner and thinner, and I think she would be indicted. And Trump has pretty much said if he becomes president, she will be indicted.
Well, on that happy note,
that's a happy note. Yes.
Yes, Professor MacDonald, I want to thank you for speaking with us today.
Hey, I enjoyed it. We'll do it again sometime.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That ends part 1 of episode 41 of Two Kevins with Grayson Steele. We'll be right back after the break. I'm Kevin Steele, and I'm promoting this spot between the two halves of our podcast as a great spot for you to put an advertisement. I actually had one lined up to put here for this week's podcast, but the guy who's supposed to have made that ad didn't get around to it. So here we go again. I swear if he doesn't get his SH*T together, I'm going to sign up for one of those multi-level marketing things and start flogging that here. I mean it. And do you really want me to go on and on about what a great business opportunity this is? Because, everyone buys these products anyway, all the time, so why not buy them from you and me? And if you sign people up, you can get a portion of the commission, so that soon you'll be making so much money you'll be able to quit your regular job and spend all your time going to conventions like the one we're having in September in Bakersfield. But that's just for managers at Blue Level. You could make it if you sign up 10 in the next 30 days. You could do it. I believe in you. The question is, do you believe in yourself? And now, a filler ad.
Hi, I'm Edna Boyle. Me and my husband love you to come and visit us at Texas and Edna Boyle's Oregon Emporium, where this week we got rhythm aces for $199.95. Yes, we got rhythm aces and 4.5 miles. Organs and pianos. We're open 24 hours a day, so bring the kids, bring the whole family, right, Tex?
That's right, Edna.
There's lots of parking space. You'll spot Tex out front cooking fresh farm sausages. Yes, cooking sausages, because this weekend is cookout weekend, right, Tex?
That's right, Edna.
All our customers are invited to grab a sausage off the grill out front. Yes, piggies for the kiddies. Then go inside and see our organs, but keep those fingers off the merchandise. Those little piggies are greasy. So come on down. We're open 24 hours a day on Route 29.
Welcome to the second half of episode 41 of Two Kevins with Grayson Steele. This segment we're calling Bonfire of the Pundits. Our pick for this discussion is a June 2nd Washington Post piece by Paul Fari titled, "We Have Reached Peak Punditry." I don't know. Taking into account our title for this segment and Fari's title, I'm not sure there's much more to say by way of introduction. So, Kevin, what was it that impressed you most about this Paul Fari piece?
That he buried the lead.
Oh?
And the lead is that punditry, at least television punditry, is now female-occupied territory.
Okay. Did he bury it because he was trying to ignore it, or do you think he just missed it?
Hard to tell.
Okay.
Reporters are not very honest these days, particularly when it comes to issues of sexuality.
All right.
But just to give you a flavor of his story, here's a passage. There was, for example, that remarkable moment on CNN in March when one panelist, Boston Herald columnist Adriana Cohen, accused another, Amanda Carpenter, of having an affair with Ted Cruz. Or that time on Fox Business Network in February when Trump supporter Omarosa Manigault argued with Fox News contributor Tamara Holden over the mispronunciation of their first names, their views of Trump, and some other things. It's the same difference, boo, Manigault said after Holden corrected her about how she says her first name. You want to come on with big boobs, then you deal with the pronunciation of your name. Look, Donald Trump stands firm on what his position is about us going into Iraq. Wait a second, Maria Bartiromo interjected. Why are you bringing up Tamara's boobs? I don't understand why you brought up Tamara's boobs. Yeah, said Holden. How does who you support have to do with the size of my boobs? Manigault eventually apologized, saying she should have called Holden a boob.
Okay. All
Now,
the entertaining cat fight is all it was.
Yes, a very entertaining cat fight. And as much as I love boobs, I will have to confess, I can't really explain how that conversation went so far south so quickly, except that one gets the impression that maybe that was the intention from the beginning.
Oh, setup time? Is that what you're implying there?
Well,
Trying to be risque?
no, it's not trying to be risque. It's trying to be female.
Oh, okay. All right.
That when these pundits, I mean, I don't know how old this Paul Farhi is, but if you want to go back to the 1980s, there were hardly any women on television as pundits. Hardly any.
I think the story does mention one.
It mentions Eleanor Clift.
Right, yeah.
Who, I'm trying to remember the fellow's name, the longtime editor of Liberty magazine in Port Townsend, Washington. He referred to her as the token idiot of the McLaughlin group.
Okay.
But you get into the 1990s, and there's not too many women. And then we hear, oh, we got to have more women, got to have more women, got to have more women. Well, I understand why you'd want more women, just more variety, you know?
Right.
A visual variety, I suppose.
Was it Fox that pioneered this with their Fox Babes, or?
I think they have a lot to do with it, except that, you know, I noticed some years ago, I don't tend to watch these kinds of shows, but you may have seen that CTV in Canada announced its replacement show for Canada AM, which was a show that was on the air for, 30, 40 years or something?
Yeah, from my youth.
And what it is not Brian Mulroney, his robotic son, Ben, with 4 women. He's the token male. All of these panel shows are completely dominated by women now.
I noticed it. Yeah, it's like morning programming is dominated by women, and it's targeted to women as well. These shows. I mean, there seems to be an assumption that all of the viewers are women. I'm not sure.
Well, you say morning programming, but morning programming has just become programming.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
In the same way that you remember when you were a kid, there was a section in the newspaper called the women's section?
Oh, yeah.
That's just the news now.
Okay. Well, you know, Daily Mail, I think I've mentioned before, they still have their female section, so. But that's just a pun on their name, the Daily Mail, so. But.
Well, look, they're almost at the point here on these panel shows of tossing glasses of wine in each other's faces. That's what they're aping.
Right.
They're aping reality TV. Boobs, boobs, boobs. Oh, boobs. What, are you going to show us your boobs?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, these sad sacks sitting on their couches, getting all excited about these women who, I'll mention this before, I don't mean to be cruel or whatever. They're not particularly good looking. But they are women, and they are on TV. And I'm watching pundits on TV because this is going to make me smarter, because this is going to make me more informed. I don't know. It's just this gets so dumbed down. If you look at Crossfire in the 1980s and 90s, when you had people like Pat Buchanan and Robert Novak and Michael Kinsley on the air.
Right.
Michael Kinsley,
Heavyweights.
is one of TV's top pundits. Right.
Mhm.
A little too cerebral for today's TV, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but is this because of the fracturing of TV and the multi-channel universe, the cable news? That's what he refers to that in the Washington Post piece. The cable news networks. They're going 24/7. Plus, you've got these other stations running their panelist shows. Is this just because everything's been diluted? Is that why it's it's turning into this shit show?
That's part of the reason, but I mean, television at any one time seems to be very much of a piece. I mean, I mentioned this woman, Omarosa. Now, she was a reality star.
Oh, okay.
She's associated with Donald Trump's The Apprentice, but I saw her on something else. It could have been The Surreal Life. Maybe I saw her briefly on 2 reality shows. She always plays the villain.
Okay.
She's always the one that you are supposed to go sss, sss, when you see her.
Okay, right.
On TV. You've seen these reality shows, right?
Not very much. No, I must admit.
Okay, well, typically the villains tend to be women. They tend to be women.
Oh, okay.
And you have a whole bunch of these women, they're malingering. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do any of this stupid shit that everyone else is doing, right? And you're, boo, boo, come on, get off your ass, join the team.
Okay.
They've flown you thousands of miles to this island, and then you watch this for the second time and you hit your head against the wall and you think, oh, for some reason I thought there was anything real about this. I didn't understand that this whole business had been scripted from the start.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is why you suspect a lot of this punditry is scripted as well. Well,
they this Paul Fowry makes it clear that they have a stable. The networks have a stable of people that they call on.
Right.
And what are these? Well, let's see. CNN has about 100 on its payroll, while MSNBC and Fox declined to provide numbers. 100 on its payroll. That's a lot of pundits. Wouldn't you say?
I would. Well, I noted that there was one weird part of this. This guy, in his Washington Post piece, claims that CNN, quote, pioneered another variation on this theme during this election season, the supporter. I'm reading now. Last year, it hired 2 commentators to defend Trump, Jeffrey Lord and Kayleigh McEnany. Scotty Hughes, another Trump supporter, is a frequent CNN guest. And then it goes on to name a bunch of other supporters for Bernie Sanders booster, a Ted Cruz, one for Jeb Bush, multiple for Hillary Clinton. I thought that had been around for a while. Am I mistaken? I don't think that they pioneered that this year, did they? Or this election cycle?
Well, no, I think it's a question of explicitness with supporter.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because before, these people could be seen to be sympathetic.
Oh.
But they weren't entirely in the tank. Now, you mentioned this Kayleigh McEnany woman.
Yeah, McEnany.
You'll recall she is the woman who had a double radical mastectomy, who Dana Lash made fun of her breasts during one of these pundit fests.
Again with the breasts?
Again with the breasts.
Okay.
And Dana Lash, who is one of the Never Trumpers, she's the one whose husband looks like the discount goth magician. Mm-hmm. That's the joke that's been made. She doubled down on the making fun of the woman who, her boob job. Yeah, well, her boob job is because her real breasts had to be cut off. Again, you got these 2 women going at each other, right?
I think that's because the pundit class is mostly seated. Otherwise, they'd be making fun of each other's butts.
Well,
okay, sorry.
He has at the beginning of the story, he mentions 4 pundits. Okay, Scotty Nels Hughes, Trump supporter. Never heard of this person. David Gregory. Yeah, David Gregory. What, didn't he used to be with NBC for many years? He does impersonations, as I recall. Quite good at them. Okay, I heard of him. Okay, and then there's Meghan McCain, who is the Zaftig daughter of the failed presidential candidate.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
She's the sex-positive Republican. Ooh, Republicanism isn't about a bunch of rules anymore. Republicanism is about shut up. Okay, just shut up, lady. Oh, and Sarah Isker Flores, former Carly Fiorina campaign manager, who has been in the news this year for two reasons. One, this extraordinary transfer of money from the Cruz campaign.
Right. Yeah.
To the Fiorina campaign, $500,000, I believe it was.
Yeah, she doesn't get...
And the accusation that she was one of Ted Cruz's many mistresses.
Yeah, okay. Along with the other one. He mentions Amanda Carpenter later on, right? Or did you say... Okay. So,
Amanda Carpenter, yes.
Yeah. She was a CNN supporter for Ted Cruz, hired as part of this explicit...
Well, let's get into it. Some pundits are contributors, some are analysts, still others are commentators or strategists. A contributor, such as Meghan McCain, is an exclusive network hireling who gets paid for his or her sound bites. They're on call like a firefighter. The amounts can range from about $150 per hit to the mid-six figures for a marquee name such as Karl Rover, David Axelrod. An analyst such as David Gergen or David Gregory is a salaried or contract employee who is expected to analyze the day's narrative rather than opine about it like a contributor. Strategist is usually a part-timer and a partisan hired for his or her political experience and insight. Then there are guests. Pundit stands temporary worker class. Guests technically aren't paid and often aren't even identified as guests. Guests are free to peddle their thoughts to whichever network will have them. Full disclosure, I've been an occasional guest on cable, just like everyone else in Washington who's ever had a byline. The ever itinerant nature of this class of talking heads explains why you're likely to see vaguely familiar faces, on MSN one day and CNN the next.
Can I freeze frame it right here?
Yeah.
I'd like to freeze frame it and then turn it around to you and say, okay, Kevin, you have had experience as a radio producer. Many a time you've told me about the difficulty in obtaining guests for this show. Seems to me it would make sense that they'd have to have a big stable of these people in order to keep producers from pulling their hair out. They've got to fill this time, so they've got these people on retainer almost, right? So
I don't know. See, people love to be on TV, and people love to be on TV even more than they love to be on radio.
Okay.
I guess I should have pointed out that I have actually been a paid pundit myself.
Oh, full disclosure, a little late now, buddy. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that was some time ago. That was the last time that I engaged in any paid punditry. I'm trying to remember when that was, 15 years ago, something like that. The CBC pays people. If, for instance, their morning show on AM, I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, whatever. This is the show hosted by Sheila Rogers.
Right, okay.
And I don't know, I was living about 5 miles away from their studio downtown, so they paid for my taxi, and they paid me $150 to appear on this show, minus union deduction. And I've been a pundit, paid pundit on CBC, let's say half a dozen times in total. It's not, I will say that I did this on remote locations, okay? Because these shows, they come out of Toronto, right?
Right, yeah.
Now, I don't think that the U.S. networks don't use remote locations all that much. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they have all these, pundits available. There's a tremendous advantage for the people on a remote location. You've seen this. The guy or the woman appears to be in a library, right?
Right, yeah.
You've noticed this effect.
The green screen effect, yeah.
No, it's not a green screen. Actually, they put you in it's a closet, effectively.
Oh, okay.
Where there is a mock-up of books or books cut in half or whatever that are behind you. There is no room. There's not enough room to swing a cat in there. And you have to have an earpiece in there. And there's a monitor, which is up above you, which you look up. Right? Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a camera pointed at you, and you have to be very careful. to not to move your eyes around, right?
Mhm.
Because that makes you look shifty. And you can't see the people you're talking to. So it makes it very difficult to get into the conversation, with the result that the people on remote locations, they tend to come off as stiffs, because there's a way that you can tell who wins the pundit conversation. It's simpler than you might imagine. Can you guess what that is?
No, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about this sawing books in half thing. Sorry, this construction guy in me.
The one who wins the conversation is the one who talks the most.
Oh, okay.
It's really simple. There's, okay,
Oh, that's why
caveat
you
here.
win this show all the time.
Caveat here. You don't want to be seen as being rude or a bully.
Okay.
You want to interrupt, but you don't want it to seem like you're interrupting. All right? Or you don't want to run roughshod over people. But, it's real simple. The one who talks the most wins.
That explains two Kevins. Okay.
But no, I'll say, as far as my own experience as being a pundit.
Well, I didn't ask about that.
The last time that this happened, I was brought on the CBC's Sunday morning news show, and we were talking about Conrad Black. And there was someone else on who was a supporter of Conrad Black. I was brought in as an opponent of Conrad Black, because I'd written this piece for Chronicles about him, which was quite negative. And I made the daring prediction that Conrad Black could well go to prison. And everyone seemed to think that I had gone too far.
Really?
I'll tell you, the problem that I had was that you have to smile when you're on TV. You have to smile. You always have to smile, because everyone expects it. Mm-hmm. Now, I was talking about Conrad Black going to prison. And I thought that, of course, you see this on TV all the time, that if I were to be smiling up a storm, this would make me look like a sadist. I'm generally not happy with the idea of people going to prison. I mean, it's quite sad, Right. Even if they deserve it, one doesn't like to glory. It's sinful to glory in the degradation of others. So for that reason, I decided I wasn't going to smile, and I was deluged with emails after my appearance. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Did your dog just die before you went on the air or something? Hey, you having personal problems or whatever?
Okay.
And, I watched the interview, and I had the typical response to being on TV, which is, who is that fat idiot with my face?
Okay.
And
so
I
it's
decided
true, it does put on 10 pounds. Okay.
And I decided that was the last time that I was going to do such a thing.
So there you go. Kevin Michael Grace. Experience out of date. Okay.
Yeah. Well.
No, but I mean, the producer angle is what I was talking about originally, right? This idea of they have this stable in order to keep the producers from freaking out, so that they always have somebody to put on. Now, I guess we should argue whether they should be putting people on all the time. That's kind of a bigger question. I mean, we talked about, we called this segment Bonfire of the Pundits. Are they burning out? Is this the burnout? Are we peak pundit out?
What do they add?
Well, entertainment, discussion about boobs or mastectomy.
Yes, apparently a lot of discussions about boobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are just two, but.
Well, look, I think that the problem with this punditry is, perhaps identifying people as supporters is the way to go. Mm-hmm. Because it's dishonest. You have these people with very strong opinions, and the idea is that they are disinterested. They are not disinterested. They are as far from being disinterested as it is possible to imagine. And they insinuate their own opinions into this, or they just come right out and say it. This isn't exactly a punditry moment. But you will recall in the 2012 election when Mitt Romney was running for president, and the moderator, Candy Crowley, was a reporter who was on all these shows, suddenly she bursts in to say, your questions about Benghazi, no, that's been dealt with. No, you can't talk like that. And Romney just stood there on the stage like he'd been hit in the face with a frozen fish.
Yeah, that's it. Good one. Yeah, frozen fish. Or
These
a
people
book cut in half. Sorry.
They are extraordinarily partisan, but the pretense is that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he goes into Fari goes into great length in a story about Ann Coulter. Now, no one's going to claim afterwards that they didn't know what Ann Coulter's opinions were.
Right. Yes.
I think that Ann Coulter is a model for this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, like someone like Bill Kristol, who's mentioned in the story. If we're talking about Bonfire of the Pundits, he's going to be the first person pushed into the volcano, isn't he?
Well, I don't know. You said the other day that you enjoyed him because he was screwing up so much. He's kind of consistently funny, I guess.
A few days before we published this podcast, he said that Lindsey Graham should run, and he might win.
Well,
now, when I say run, I mean as a third-party candidate for president of the United States. Bill seems to have forgotten that Lindsey Graham was, in fact, a Republican presidential candidate for the nomination.
Mm.
And he got kicked off to the kiddies table pretty early on because he consistently scored in the polls with less than 1%. Despite being a senator since, forever, and despite being one of those senators that people who pay attention to that sort of thing know about, that's to say he's quoted quite a lot and has been quoted for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's an aspect to this punditry or the Bonfire of the Pundits we haven't approached because we've been looking mostly at this Washington Post piece. But it was the pundits, the print pundits. They suffered a severe fall from grace this time around, particularly on the right. The fall from grace for the National Post and their Against Trump cover, and then with Bill Kristol, who you just spoke of, making these bizarro predictions. They suffered badly this time round, and I'm wondering if their difficulty has spilled over into the television pundits. I mean, those are the serious guys, the print guys, right? They get to sit down and think about what they say before they say it. They don't have to just spew it off the top of their heads. And they suffered a severe setback. So perhaps if we can't take those guys seriously, we can't take these television people seriously at all.
Well, I believe the reason for this is to go back to Marshall McLuhan again. These people are looking at the recent past and they're extrapolating that into the future. That is what we call the conventional wisdom.
Okay.
And when things change, these people, well, most people for that matter, are incapable of dealing with it. That you will see, it's not just that the pundits got everything about Donald Trump wrong. Now, Donald Trump is quite an anomaly. I remember when Pat Buchanan ran for president in 1996, even before, when the subject of his candidacy came up, the heavyweights on CNN, the people like Mark Shields and Jack Germond, would nod their heads sagely and say, the presidency is not an entry-level position. Ooh, well, okay. The pundits have spoken. Pat Buchanan is disqualified. Now, Pat Buchanan had been, he'd had senior posts. He'd been a speechwriter for Nixon and Ford, and he'd had senior posts in, Reagan administration, or a senior post in the Reagan administration as well. So that is to say, he had a lot more experience in politics than Donald Trump, who has none. But when I say that they got it wrong, it's not just that they got it wrong about Trump, that, okay, this guy comes from nowhere politically and wins the Republican nomination. Every step along the way, they said, okay, here's where it all begins to fall apart.
Oh, yeah.
No. Okay, I was wrong about last week. This is where it really begins to fall apart.
Yeah, this is the end.
If Donald Trump can, take the mickey or take the piss or whatever from Megyn Kelly, America's sweetheart, if he can make fun of a, what do we call, disabled journalist, if he can, John McCain. If he can point out the fact that John McCain's claim to fame is that he sat out the Vietnam War in a prison. Now, this was obviously not his fault, and he suffered greatly in prison. All these things were going to destroy him.
Yeah, it's still going on to this day. I mean, right now we've got the Mexican judge thing happening. That's the end for him, right? I mean, okay. They seem to think that one of these days it's going to happen. But going back to when I was talking about...
No, I just... my greater point, my larger point was this. What this indicates is not simply that they don't understand Donald Trump. They don't understand the basis of his support. They don't understand that, okay, so he made fun of someone who's disabled. Okay, so what? What, am I supposed to start crying? I'm so deeply, deeply ashamed. Oh, no, he made some sort of comment about Megyn Kelly, basically delighting in his triumph over her. Oh, no, he's attacking a woman. Oh, God, no, never attack a woman.
Mm-hmm.
He went after Rosie O'Donnell, and, oh, no, he's attacking a woman. She's the woman everyone hates.
Well, okay, so that's really not a good example of the
but
anti-fragile
but you're not supposed to attack a woman. Not supposed to attack a woman under any circumstances are you supposed to attack a woman. And Donald Trump's supporters saying, well, why not?
Mm.
Women get to attack men, and they do, often viciously. So why can't you attack women? Wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be about equality.
Well, we're going to be facing that one down big time now because his opponent's a woman, so I guess that's off the table. But
she seems to think that the fact that she's a woman is a big plus for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, no, I suppose it was a big plus for her in that. Oh, well, it's a woman's turn. It's her turn, and it's a woman's turn. Right?
God help us all. Yeah.
Oh, and please, we got to have a female president. Well, why do we got to have a female president? She's completely misunderstood the tenor of the times.
Yes, that's true. And she's also deranged. They can't seem to produce a picture of her where she doesn't look insane, including the victory pictures of her that are showing. I wanted to point out something, though, to go back a year. When we were talking about the pundits failing now, what we were talking about just under a year ago, like back in August, was that the political elites had lost control of the campaign. I'm looking at a headline here from somebody in Market Watch who wrote a column on August 19th, 2015. Political elites have lost control of the campaign and they can't stand it. So this idea that, we were reacting against the political class seems to have spilled over to the pundits now. And, is this just sort of a step down? Okay, they're the next ones to go.
Well, part of it has to do with the declining importance of television.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to put on my old man hat here and say there was a time when the CBS, NBC, and ABC evening news programs were a big deal, a very big deal indeed. Walter Cronkite, he lost the Vietnam War for America. That's what everyone believes, right?
Right, yeah.
And, if when Dan Rather decided to go after Ronald Reagan, that was not good for him. I remember a conversation I had with Colby Kosh around the time that it was rumored that Katie Couric was going to take over the anchor gig on the CBS Evening News.
Ah, yes, this story.
And I expressed the opinion that this was in fact going to happen. And Colby got very angry with me indeed. It was one of those. There's always often amusing, talking to this fellow because, oh dear, I've so offended Colby, with my brashness. I'm just so Jay June compared to him. This was never going to happen, he told me, because CBS understood, it's rich tradition, and she's not a newswoman, and the Today Show doesn't count. And I said that the Today Show is the news now. That's the news. And that's why they're going to pick Katie Couric. The fact that she's a dimwit, who's, I don't know what, she's practically a dwarf, that woman. Do you know she literally needs to be hoisted into her chair?
Oh, really? Did they invent something for that?
Literally. She cannot, she's so short she can't get into a chair by herself.
Why didn't they just get a lower set?
Well, you don't want the host's hands, actually touching the floor.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
But no, and as I said, Colby Kosh was very disappointed in me because there's just another opportunity where I just couldn't prevent myself from yucking it up. But I was perfectly serious. The evening news programs are not important anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And television news is increasingly not important anymore. And I think part of this bonfire of the pundits is that the result will be lower and lower ratings for the cable news channels, cable news networks.
Okay.
Well, if you wanted to know what was going to happen in politics and you watched these guys, well, they were wrong. They were wrong about everything, right? And more to the point, I think we're returning to an era when people will go directly to partisan sources. Now, you can check out the other side if you want to, but this phony balance, I think, has taken a critical hit.
Well,
because the news media themselves, they seem to be, that they're stunned by Trump's attacks on them. Now, they don't seem to read the polls. The news media delights in the low standing of politicians. Well, I don't know, they delight in it, but it must scare them a little bit if they think about it. Because who are the greatest friends of the politicians? The ruling elite, the media, right?
That's true, but I was going to point out that you need conflict on these things. So if you go to partisan sources and you stick with only one side only, you're not going to have the reality show conflict that you're going to need in order to create the entertainment that you believe is what keeps people eyeballs on your show. Isn't that part of it?
Well, you're defining entertainment as a barely suppressed fight.
Well, that was going to be one of my last questions, but I'll jump to it right now. Do you think in this election season we're going to see somebody actually stand up, walk over across the table, and deliver a punch? Is that going to happen? Somebody's just going to lose it.
I think. Well, let's see how election night turns out in November.
I wasn't thinking election night. I was thinking before that. I was thinking, Morning Joe's going to stand up and just belt somebody. That's it. Storm off the stage. Disappear into the night, never seen again.
Well, the predictions of newspapers famously lines bird cages, right? Mm-hmm. The day after it's published. People still have birds? Do they still keep bird cages? I just wonder whether this is one of those, metaphors which become old and musty.
Well, you can take your old man hat off now.
But let's just assume that people still keep birds. The advantage of making predictions on television is that, of course, these things are forgotten almost immediately. Although Jon Stewart used to have a lot of fun by going through the tapes.
Right.
And hearing the ridiculous things that people on television say. But what's important to these people is that, oh my God, they want Hillary Clinton to win. They so desperately want Hillary Clinton to win. And the idea of Donald Trump becoming the president, well, you see, from an entertainment point of view, that would be good for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why they played up his candidacy in the beginning. Then they realized with horror that, oh my God, this guy could win. Mm. Oh my God, he has won. Oh my God, he could beat Hillary Clinton. Oh, they're not quite up to that point yet of understanding what's happening in the race. That it's not just a question of him, that he could beat Hillary. He is going to beat Hillary, and he's going to beat her handily. But they're going to lose it when this happens.
That's why you said election night, I guess, is for the punch. Yeah. Okay.
that well, what you're going to see, I mean, if the polls show Trump with a substantial lead, say 5 points or more, in the weeks directly before the election, you're going to get a lot of, oh, well, this American experiment, yeah, it was good while it lasted. Yeah, just, turn out the lights, the party's over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, sure. Apparently the American people decided they want fascism. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, who can we elect next time? Maybe we can cut some cells from Hitler's corpse and, we can grow another Hitler and he can be the next American president. The bitterness of these people is going to be wonderful to behold.
A lot of them will be asking, will the military allow this to happen?
Well, Kunstler, Jim Kunstler has been saying this. I don't know that, will the military allow this to happen? The media does not like the military.
Yeah.
Because they know that the values held by people in the military, not the diverse military, the real military, they're diametrically opposed to their own values for all their talk of supporting the troops.
Yeah. Okay,
I was
using that as an example of the extremity, or the extreme
disbelief and fury is what we're going to be seeing. Now, it is what the news media does. This idea that, there's a bunch of smart guys there and they analyze all the things that are happening in the world. Yeah, there's smart guys there and there's smart girls there. Not as many as there used to be. And the smart people aren't given much time on television anymore because of this conflict that you were talking about. Analyzing the news? No. They're in the business of what Chomsky and Herman called manufacturing consent.
Ah, I remember that.
That we are going to provide a narrative here, and everything that we want to happen is explained by the narrative. Everything that you might want to happen doesn't fit into the narrative, so it's not going to work. Donald Trump, no political experience. Donald Trump, reality star. Donald Trump, orange face. Donald Trump, orange hair. Donald Trump, 3 wives. Donald Trump, the best sex I ever had, etc., etc. All of this is to let you know that Donald Trump was unsuitable to be president of the United States. We've seen other examples of this, like the way that they didn't like Howard Dean,
right?
The prospect of him becoming the Democratic nominee, and they finished off his candidacy. He made this yelp at a podium, and oh my God, he made an odd noise.
The scream was referred to.
Yeah, the scream. So he's unfit to be the Democratic nominee. Hillary Clinton actually barked like a dog this year, but Hillary's on their side. So, that's all right.
Is she the favorite of the pundit class, or was Bernie the favorite? And now they've got
no. She's the favorite of the pundit class.
Okay, maybe you could just take a moment and explain why.
She's the favorite of the pundit class because she's the power.
Okay.
She represents more of the same. Just more of the same. That Sanders represents some sort of change, and the media is not happy with change for various reasons. Let's give 2 reasons. One, they might have to think about things. That if things just go on the way that they have been under Obama, nothing's new, so there's nothing to think about. Second thing is they like the way that Hillary does things. They like the globalism. They like the warmongering. They like the identity politics up in the forefront. They love the whole corrupt system that Hillary is the exemplar of.
Because they're
and
rolling.
They like they look at someone like Hillary Clinton's daughter Chelsea, who was given a job in the media. They gave Chelsea a job for some, I don't know, was it $250,000, $500,000 a year, where she interviewed the Geico Gecko. She interviewed the Geico Gecko.
Can we get him? Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, what was it? Geico Gecko. He talks like a spiv, right?
Right, yeah.
He talks like this, right?
Mhm.
You know, it's so difficult. It's really difficult being small like a gecko is. Isn't that what he does?
That's right. See, Kevin, you do that so well. We can actually fake our interview with the Gecko.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, back to your point. Didn't mean to.
No, see, they like this. They like the oligarchy.
Yeah.
Because Hillary, you know, okay, I have a daughter. She's not very good looking. She's not very talented. But, you know, we're going to make her a media star as a thank you to Bill and Hillary, who have changed America in the way that we like it. And they have engineered, not entirely, but they've been part of this movement to making America an oligarchy where, you know, I went to Harvard or Yale, and I married a woman who went to Harvard or Yale, and we had our trophy child who's going to go to Harvard or Yale, and our trophy child is going to be just epic. You know, look at the schools before Harvard or Yale. It's all planned in advance that people like us get to run the United States, and people who are not like us, you know, they get to, these horrible flyover people, they get to live miserable lives, hopefully, and, you know, die off, you know, so they can be replaced by these vibrant people from Guatemala and Costa Rica and El Salvador. Because, you know, have you been to that bodega up there on 45th Street? Oh, it is to die for.
Okay. Well, but from what you've been telling me, it sounds like the bonfire has just been lit, or it's slow burning now, and that it's gonna really start picking up in the next couple of months, the next few months. Is that what we're seeing? It's gonna burn itself out immediately after the election, but it's just starting to sort of kindle right now. Do you think it's gonna get somewhere?
Well, I mean, if you look at CNN, I'm trying to remember the name of this fellow who runs the network now.
Mm-hmm.
He was associated with the Today Show, I
Right.
believe,
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. The idea is that CNN is going to drop the pretense of being a news network.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember I was quite excited when CNN started because I liked watching news on television. And I thought, you know, the network news shows, the evening news shows, they used to have long reports. And then everything got knocked down to 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, right? And I thought, okay, here's an opportunity for some long form news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there isn't much news on CNN, and there never has been all that much news on CNN. And it's not much different, say, with the BBC World Service, because they have a handful of stories that they repeat endlessly throughout the day.
Yeah, some of them on a
catch
15-minute
them
rotation.
pretty much every hour.
Yeah. Well, I know they have those news stations now that repeat everything 15 minutes, you know, so it's like
So
endless
the
loop.
idea of this, what's his name, Jeff, whatever his name is at CNN, that, yeah, who wants to watch the news? So we're going to turn CNN into an entertainment network, sort of a news-flavored entertainment network. And perhaps I should have said this at the beginning, but I suppose I didn't think of it. There you see the transition towards reality show punditry.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want a bunch of chicks, and we want there to be boobs. And we want the audience to think that, oh my God, one of these women is going to slap the other.
In the boobs.
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, they've moved away from the idea of news because news, right? But can you imagine anything more boring than news?
Okay. Yes.
Well, I mean, people do think news is boring, right? I mean,
Right.
you've looked at newspapers these days. I'm not, you know, talking about, say, the New York Times, but the newspaper that, you know, most American cities, most Canadian cities,
Mm-hmm.
you open it up, there's not a lot of news in it, is there?
Yes.
I mean, you have your big, you have your opinion pages, and you have your TV listings, and you have your what's on pages, and you have your gossip pages, which are already, you know, 12, 18, 36 hours old. right?
Yeah.
You have these features about celebrities, not very much news anymore because, oh, yes, they're heading up towards a presidential election in France. Oh, God. Didn't they just have an election in France? Actually, they hold them every 6 years. Well, that's too many.
Time
Okay, because
flies.
I don't ever want to hear about a presidential election in France. What does France have to do with my life? Now that's that's a valid position.
Mhm.
All right, you could take that position. What does France have to do with my life? I'm not French. I don't go to France. Where I live, we're not interacting with France. But of course, you start to think like that, then your world becomes rather narrow rather quickly.
True enough, yes.
Because, you seem to have this great interest in Beyonce, right? Queen Bey. What relevance does she have to your life? Really? Oh, you read all these stories about her? Do you think that these stories are true? Do you think that her and Jay-Z have this loving marriage? Do you?
Well, at least
Probably think that her pregnancy was real.
well, we're allowed to suspend disbelief on that one, right? So there we go.
No, but you see these shows, these news shows, the CNNs. Your CNNs, your MSNBCs, your Fox News, they're obsessed with celebrities.
Yeah.
Now, here's another reason for the proliferation of pundits is an attempt to create another kind of celebrity class.
Well, perhaps. There was one sentence in this story. I wanted to find it here. That is in the Washington Post story that we've been discussing throughout. I don't want to go banging on the keyboard here because we're on the air kind of thing. We're recording. But the sentence was something to the effect that, if you're a plumber or a working guy, you're never going to make it into this class. And, I guess technically I shouldn't be here, but maybe that's where they're going to go. Maybe they're going to just dispense with the pundit class and start going with more man in the street type things. They missed this thing so badly with Donald Trump that maybe people want to sort of see housewives of New Jersey commenting on politics instead.
Yeah, but we do have that. Adam Curtis has talked about that in his documentary, that the news, after the collapse of of communism, the news media suffered a great blow to its self-esteem.
Okay. So
I mean,
this is another one.
Well, how was Amanda Carpenter different from dragging someone in off the street? Seriously.
Better makeup, nicer boobs.
Yeah, okay. It's just, she is really not very far removed from some woman on the street. In the same way that Sarah Isgur, what's her name?
Flores.
Or Meghan McCain. Oh, your father was something or other. And this is part of their appeal.
Oh, okay. So we already have what this
No,
was.
I mean, they're part of their appeal is the illusion that they're just like us.
Oh,
They're ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that most of these pundits are ordinary people in the sense that their IQs aren't particularly high.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make a distinction here between the types of pundits, Amanda Carpenter and Omarosa and the like, and the old timers. As I say, a lot of these old timers, for all their pompousness, are rather intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Ann Coulter is certainly highly intelligent. But, Ann Coulter is, these people, I'm sure they hate her on these networks. She has complained that they don't talk about her books. They don't mention her books, even though they're New York Times bestsellers.
Right, yeah.
Top 5 New York Times bestsellers. They don't want to talk about her books. Ann Coulter is sort of an ideal there, right? Because she has star power. The problem with Ann Coulter for these people is that they don't like what she has to say.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem because, as I say, the networks are all about manufacturing consent. I'll just give you an example. Do you remember Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, MH17?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, okay.
July 2014, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Now, the plane went down in the Ukraine.
Right. was on its way to...
Putin did it. Putin did it. Putin did it. Putin did it. That didn't look really solid right from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear anything about this plane anymore. 283 passengers and 15 crew. That's 298 people. That's supposedly international people that Putin or his, allies murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to suggest to you that if there were any evidence that Putin or his allies in the eastern Ukraine were actually responsible for the downing of this aircraft, we would never hear the end of it. Every time Putin came up or anything to do with Russia or the Ukraine, they'd bring this up, but they don't, for the reason that they just jumped in to say that Putin was responsible, and then when that narrative collapsed, they just backed away from it. Now, it's helpful to them that the first thing that everyone heard about it is that Putin did it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he almost certainly didn't do it, well, the news media, they get to decide these things, or they used to get to decide these things.
Okay.
The growth of the internet as an alternative information source has meant that the media cannot get away with the kind of stuff that it used to get away with.
Okay.
And if we're going anywhere if we're looking for a conclusion here to this discussion, is we're going to see continued decentralization
and new pundits or decentralized punditry. I mean, I'm already turning to other sources anyway. I mean, that's pretty obvious. That's the alt-right has been doing that for the last year, tearing away at the established punditry and offering its own up now. I mean, we had talked about that, alternative magazines, that kind of thing, emerging. This hasn't happened yet, but I mean, it could happen after the Bonfire of the Pundits, after they burn out. All I'll say is they better have nice breasts.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, I am a pundit myself on this podcast.
Me too.
But yes, you're a pundit.
Thanks.
Yourself.
Thank you.
But here's the thing. I just sound like Jeff Winger here. Jeff Winger. I'm just a man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just a man who has opinions and knows some things, and people can like my opinions or not, or they can dispute my knowledge or dread word expertise if they like. There's no authority attached to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think
this idea? I mean, these people, they're abusing their privilege. I mean, I have to say that. I mean, I don't watch Fox News, and I got it free when it was introduced to Canada a few years ago, and I found it rather shocking, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't watch it, and then this Tamara Holder. What, Tamara Holder's a thing? Omaroso, she's a pundit now? Really? I mean, as I say, they have abused their privileges. And I guess there's two ways they can go. I mean, they can just go headlong to the bottom, or they can pull back.
Well, there you go. I think that is the last word. Dems are the real racists, and check your pundit privilege, Meghan McCain.
Yes.
Okay. I think we're going to call an end to episode 41. Unless you had something else to offer us there, Kevin, I think we're going to wrap it up at this point.
Wrap it up.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, episode 41 of Two Kevins with Grace and Steele. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.